Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting over the first episode of Cowboy Bebop. If you'd like to watch along, start watching now. Now, it's been a fairly long time since I've watched Cowboy Bebop. I don't remember all of the intricacies of the ongoing plot. I'm fairly certain that this is a flashback, or a memory, or something like that. Not what's going on in the present day. I like the slow fade that's been going on from black and white to color, albeit muted color. It's nice and artistic. So for those of you that have already listened to me comment over Fooly Cooly, you might be noticing something of a ongoing theme in my work. But I gotta say, I really dig the soundtrack of Cowboy Bebop. It's got all kinds of nice jazz music. Like, obviously, the opening theme is great. I believe it's called Tank. But really, when you get down to it, the entire soundtrack is nothing but gold. 24 karat gold. I can't remember off the top of my head who is responsible for the soundtrack. The name's not coming to mind, but I know they did like an extensive tour of the United States, learning from the various jazz musicians here, sort of learning the trade, so to speak, from the masters. Jazz music is insane. Like, there's so much technical knowledge that goes into it in regards to music. Like, it boggles the mind. So it looks like we're sort of dealing with the planet Mars here. And, well, maybe not. It's hard to tell just by looking at it. I don't know. The entirety of Cowboy Bebop just interests me. I like the mix of noir elements with the semi-recent future and all the technology that comes with it. So here we got our two main characters as of yet, Spike Spiegel and Jet Black. They are bounty hunters. So they're going after a guy named Asimov, and fairly certain that that's a reference to Isaac Asimov, the famous sci-fi writer. He was very influential to the genre. I believe he wrote most of his stuff in like the early 50s. And he was sort of credited with coming up with a lot of stuff that became commonplace later. Especially the 3 rules of robotics. And those sort of deal with like how robots should interact with humans. You know, self-aware robots. Don't do harm to people. Don't allow harm to come to people through your own inaction. Stuff like that. Hugely influential stuff. So, Spike and Jet are having money problems as things stand. So, you know, they're bounty hunters. They hunt people for money, but It seems like they cause so much collateral damage that they sort of break even all the time. It's sort of like a typical, not a plot device, but I guess a setup. And, I dig that. I think that's a nice sort of holding pattern through which bigger things can be built off of. A lot of these sequences in outer space always struck me as really beautiful. Like, we'll see a bit more of that when Spike's flying around, I think. I don't know, man. There's just something about interstellar travel that gets me. I want humanity to roam amongst the stars someday. So here we've got Asimov and his lady friend clearly up to no good. Alright, so I think we've just sort of latched onto the crux of this episode. That vial that Asimov briefly flashed the bartender. Yeah, so it's drugs. So the drugs are sort of like a sensory enhancing sort of thing. Like, I guess they grant you superhuman both perception and abilities, allowing Asimov to dodge bullets, I guess. Yeah, don't do drugs, kids. This is what'll happen to you. So it seems like Spike has visited some sort of wise man to get a divination on Asimov. He gives a pretty grim portent of the future. This is some of that like noir stuff I like. The like Spike and Jet are ostensibly doing good, but they're operating outside the law and using some maybe less than lawful means of acquiring information. I dig stuff like that. So judging by Asimov's reaction, it looks like the bloody eye has some adverse effects after it wears off. The sort of frenzy-like state. How very cryptic. So here we get a demonstration that Spike is clearly more proficient than he makes himself appear, given that he was able to both slip that hot dog into his mouth and also sort of a sleight of hand a couple other things. Alright, well, I guess they're not on Mars, like I guessed before. So here we have that nice juxtaposition of Spike referring to himself as a cowboy in this futuristic setting. Yeah, there we get a nice little glimpse of Spike doing what he does and lifting something off of Asimov while feigning weakness. It's very cheeky of him. So I think realistically, Spike probably could have gotten out of that had he felt like it. I think he was just sort of playing the long game. I like the interactions between Spike and Jet. The casualness with which they speak to each other speaks to, I guess, a strong familiarity and, like solid friendship there. I dig it. I like when characters are well written like that. As far as side characters go, I like this trio of old men and how they essentially have the same argument every time they're on screen. Man, built 2025. That's a man. That's a that hurts my brain to think about. Oop, Spike pulled a fast one on him. He knows he doesn't have it. Whoopsies. Alright. Now I think as far as fight choreography goes, I think this scene's pretty top tier. And I think part of what really sells it is the music in the background. It's like a nice, frantic saxophone riff that develops over the course of the piece. It's nice. I particularly like the framing of that shot where the woman was pointing the gun, watching them fight. I I don't know, like it. Something about that is very artistically pleasing to me, and I can't quite put it into words. I especially like how it was only like a very brief thing. Like they did it twice, but each one was only a couple seconds at most. So here we have what I think is a rather nice sequence of them flying and trying to chase each other down. I think the music adds a nice sense of serenity, especially as they start to exit the atmosphere and fly into open space. Just like that, it's all over. Seeing the blockade with Spike behind him, realizing they would never make it to Mars, she decided to pop Asimov in the head and save everyone else the trouble. I also really like this scene in the end, where it mirrors the first scene, but it's slightly different. You know, Spike has gone elsewhere to prevent Jet from bothering him while he's doing his martial arts routine. But that whole thing about, hey, the beef and bell peppers is ready. You know, it's a nice, not juxtaposition, but the beginning and the end are the same. Showing that, you know, after all this whole bounty hunting business with Asimov, they're still basically exactly where they started. You know, if I had to assemble like a list of all the best first episodes of anything ever, I would say that this ranks pretty high on the list. Because, you know, in terms of Cowboy Bebop, it doesn't introduce all the characters because they come in later. But I think just in terms of setting the tone, it does a very good job. And showing the dynamic that Spike and Jet have, I really like how it does that too. And like I was talking about, the way the first scene and the last scene sort of mirror each other, I dig that too, showing that I guess that there's a futility in trying. You know, no matter what you do, you always end up where you started. It's kind of a melancholy, downer thing, but you know, I think in many ways Cowboy Bebop is almost entirely melancholy. Like, for all the cool action scenes and how exciting those are, like, from what I remember, there are a lot of episodes that are just a big kick in the teeth in terms of how much of a downer they are. But, you know, that's part of why I love it so much. What is happiness if you don't have sadness to compare it to? So, based on this preview for the next episode, it looks like we get introduced to Ein next episode. You know, Ein doesn't do a whole lot all the time, but he's still a pretty solid character in my estimation. Alright, well, this has been the first episode of Cowboy Bebop. If you enjoyed listening to this commentary, then why don't you come by next time for the next episode?